Grasp of Avarice is one of the easier dungeons we have in Destiny 2. The solo experience isn't necessarily easy, but it's a great starter dungeon if you're trying to get your feet wet with solo flawless runs. In this video, I'll be breaking down solo Grasp of Avarice encounter by encounter. We'll be talking about strategies for each fight, optimal builds for every character, and maybe we'll get a cool emblem along the way. So, without further ado, here's how to solo flawless Grasp of Avarice. The intro to the dungeon is pretty hard to mess up, but you still need to be careful. For this section, you're going to want an ad clearing loadout. Trinity Ghoul, Wither Horde, and Sunshot are all excellent choices here. Once you dunk your 50 engrams, you're onto the jumping puzzle. Slow and steady is the name of the game here. Practice this area a few times so you know the exact routing, and really keep an eye out for the barrel going up the stairs. There aren't any optimal loadouts for this section, but I prefer having an Eager Edge sword equipped so I can make it go a little faster. Once you pass the jumping puzzle, you're onto Avarice, the first boss fight of the run. This thing packs a punch, so let's talk about how you're going to survive. First off, triple void resist mods are necessary. Avarice is going to be beaming you constantly, so any way we can reduce that damage is a plus. In terms of builds, you've got a few options. Let's start with Warlock, the first class I got solo flawless with. Warlock is particularly busted because of the constant super regeneration in this dungeon. You've essentially got Well of Radiance online at all times, which makes dying surprisingly hard to accomplish. My exotic of choice here is Sunbracers, which works wonders both for ad clear and boss damage. And my weapons consisted of a Riptide, Callous Mini Tool, and Dragon's Breath. For my crayon-eating Titan friends, Solar is the way to go. Lorelei Splendor is my top pick, but you can make a case for Precious Scars as well. All that matters is that you swap to Pyrogale Gauntlets for the damage phase. For my weapons, I ran with the same fusion rifle, but I swapped out the Callous and the Dragon's Breath for Sunshot and a bait-and-switch Apex Predator. Hunters have two solid options. The obvious one is Solar. Celestial Nighthawk puts out so much damage now that it feels wrong not to run it, but Arc Hunter is also a solid option, and a fun one at that. Arc Strider is an ad-clearing machine with a surprising amount of potential for boss DPS. For weapons, I decided to go with a double special loadout of Wastelander with 1-2 punch, Forbearance with Chain Reaction, and the Lament. I also swapped out one of my Void Resist mods for a Loosened Blade mod, so that I could hit more charged attacks with Lament. Alright, let's talk about the process for this fight. When I run this encounter solo, I grab all 25 engrams I need to start damage before dunking anything. That means clearing out each room back to back instead of clearing one and going to deposit at the crystal before moving to the next room. This is a bit riskier since the engram timer is always ticking down. The Scorch Cannon triggers can be finicky sometimes, which could result in an untimely death. If you don't feel comfortable dunking them all at once, just don't. It's a small time save and it isn't necessary for the run whatsoever. As a small piece of advice, remember that you can still cast some of your abilities while holding the Scorch Cannon. If you pop a super or use your class ability, you'll drop the cannon, but feel free to throw grenades and use powered melees without dropping it. Just something to keep in mind. Another thing to be cognizant of is the Ogre itself. During damage, Avarice will get pretty close to you. Your positioning at this time is really important for a few reasons. Firstly, if you're using a rocket for damage, like I am most of these runs, blowing yourself up is a legitimate risk at this part. And second, Avarice itself is another hazard. If you're sitting in a well, this isn't going to be the biggest inconvenience, but Hunters and Titans don't have wells. My best advice is play as close to the crystal as you can. There isn't a whole lot of cover here, so that's the best you've got to work with. Titans obviously can also use their barricades as needed. Once you've got that down, it's essentially rinse and repeat until Avarice dies. If you get your damage optimized, finishing the encounter in 3 to 4 phases is very doable. Now on to the stressful part. At first glance, the Sparrow section is the ugliest part of this run, and you'd be right with that assumption. However, with enough practice, it's a cakewalk. There aren't any loadout requirements for this segment, but I'd strongly suggest having an Eager Edge sword equipped. In the event that your Sparrow breaks or you need to hop off, Eager Edge can help close the distance between you and a bomb. This encounter is fortunately made a little less stressful by the extender buttons around the arena. We don't have to go for many of them, but there are a few buttons in or not far from our path that will help take a load off. These are the ones that I always go for. The Sparrow section is going to be one that you just have to practice to get good at. That's really all there is to it. Practice will make perfect with this encounter. Once you're past the Sparrow section, it's on to the Fallen Shield, which is on the tier list for my least favorite dungeon encounters ever. There isn't really that much risk in this area, and if you know how the encounter works, you'll probably be able to do this on your first try. Honestly, the biggest risk is your burden timer expiring, so keep an eye on it. There isn't really an optimal loadout for this encounter either. Whatever you know will keep you alive against waves of dregs will work just fine. Hell, you could cover yourself in bubble wrap like that one Chuck E. Cheese commercial, and you'd probably be okay. Once again, I'd recommend having an eager edge sword on. In the event that you misalign a cannon and go astray, having eager edge could save your run. Not to mention that servitors go down pretty quickly to supers and special weapons, so having an effective power weapon isn't that important. Beyond any of that, just play it safe. This is a slow encounter, so use it as a chance to catch your breath before the final boss. This is probably the hardest encounter in the dungeon, and for good reason. While Avarice doesn't have the most health in the game, it's still a bit higher than the Ogre. You've also got to worry about Armady, the sniper shank, who has a beefy amount of health for some reason. Let's start breaking this encounter down. Warlocks, Sunbracers, and Wall of Radiance are still going to be your best friends here. Depositing your engrams is usually going to be a stressful time, especially with the shank still alive, but having the ability to plop down a well every single time you deposit will save your ass more times than you can count. Okay, maybe not that much, but it's really effective, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. Titans, Solar also stays winning with you. Sunbreakers have a great neutral game when it comes to survivability. Pirate Gale puts out so much damage, and having a barricade to use while you deposit your engrams can help you play around the boss and adds. Hunters, this one's going to be an uphill battle for you. Gunslinger was my best bet. Once again, Celestial Nighthawk gives your damage a pretty substantial boost, and using Assassin's Cowl in the engram stage of the fight makes things a whole lot safer. And, of course, triple sniper resist is necessary for this one. Armady is dead set on ruining your run. Don't let it happen. Okay, let's talk about the encounter itself now. Your goal is to deposit 60 engrams in order to start the damage phase. There's two ways you can go about this. Picking up 10 engrams each drop cycle for 6 cycles, or picking up 20 engrams each drop cycle for 3 cycles. If you're doing 10 at a time, you're going to flop between the left side and the right side when it comes to dropping the engrams. Get all 10 engrams from whatever side you're on, then go dunk them in the middle. Feel free to pop your super if you need to stay alive, seeing as you'll get it right back for another 10 engrams. You'll do this 5 more times until all 60 have been deposited and damage starts. If you're doing 20 at a time, the process is pretty similar. When the engrams get released, clear out whatever side you're on, left or right, then run to the lower middle section. If you're fast enough, and the engrams decide they actually want to get picked up, you'll end up with 20 engrams, which you can go deposit immediately. You'll do this 2 more times until all 60 have been deposited and damage starts. When it comes to depositing your engrams, you'll have a lot of things firing at you, but the most important of these will be the sniper shank. Now is the time where you'll want to deal with it. I did this in a few different ways during my runs. You can freeze the shank with a chill clip weapon, then hit it with a rocket. You can throw supers at it, primarily Golden Gun. Or you can use a conservative amount of power ammo on it. Note that you might have to take 2 phases wiping out the shank since it has so much health. Do as much as you can, but don't sacrifice the run for it. If you need to rotate, just rotate. Once you get to damage, there are 2 spots I mainly damage from. For my Warlock, I like damaging right from the crystal. Well essentially makes you invincible, so none of the incoming fire around the arena is that big of a deal. For my Hunter and Titan, however, I like going behind where he stands. It provides a bit of cover against some of the surrounding adds, but also from the boss itself. If you need to get out of harm's way, it's just a quick walk. Once damage ends, rotate away from the center platform and get ready to do it all over again. I think 4 to 5 phases is good for this encounter, especially if you're newer to the solo run. However, and this should go without saying, optimize your damage and get it done as fast as possible. The longer you spend in an encounter, the higher the risk of you dying to something silly or making an avoidable mistake. Nah. Run it back. And just like that, Grasp of Avarice is complete. Go into your triumphs, claim your emblem, and flex on all the people who said you wouldn't get it done. Hopefully this guy was helpful. I'm still getting the ropes of this, so whatever constructive feedback you have would go a long way into improving the next guide I make. Thanks for watching.